So as Tom said, People is actually backed by Beam Development and Training, who are um, which is the organization that Tom and I are from. We support organizations through leadership development, through training, through coaching, on well-being, personal development. And our work is really a blend of psychology, neuroscience, neuropsychology, and then practical science-backed tools to help people. So whether that is dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress, understanding imposter syndrome or psychological safety, the idea is always that we give you practical tools that you can take away and start using straight away. If today is the first time you've ever heard of People or Beam, you are so very welcome. Have a look at the website, beamtraining.co.uk, and you can find out much more about us and sign up for all of our other free events as well. So, psychological safety. So, we're going to begin with just a quick outline of what we're going to be covering. And it's really important that for those of you who are new, that you recognize that everything we deliver in these lunch and learns is always with the lens of you being in a people-centric role. So the content we're going to cover today in terms of psych safety is slightly different to what we would deliver within an organization, because this is very much focused on a people lens. And many of you are in roles where people come to you when they find something difficult, sensitive, emotional, when they don't know who to turn to, when things are a bit messy. And you're probably the person that other people trust, the person they vent to, the person they ask for advice, the person that is expected to have all the answers. And sometimes you probably feel like you don't have the answers. You probably sometimes feel like you're not the one that can solve everything, and you're perhaps not as calm as other people see you on the outside. So today is really about not just how we can create teams where people feel they can speak up and feel psychologically safe, but it's about how we can create safety in a way that's sustainable for us. So we're not trying to carry that for the entire organization, because psychological safety should not and does not depend on one kind, compassionate, emotionally available person holding up the whole entire organization. Psych safety, as we say all the time to leaders, is a cultural issue, not an individual issue, not a HR issue. It's the responsibility of every single employee within that organization. And it should be therefore built into the way that a company communicates, the way they listen, the way they respond to challenges, the way they deal with failures and setbacks. And it should follow through in every element of an organization. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to get a better understanding of what psych safety is. We're going to really look at that in terms of what it looks like for people with that real lens of making sure that you're not doing it at the expense of yourself. We'll talk about the hidden cost of being the individual that is carrying everything. And then I will share with you some really practical tools, including 5 safety signals that would be a really good foundation point if you're trying to build more psych safety within the workplace. So let's start with understanding what gets in the way of psychological safety. Because psychological safety, as I say, is very much about the culture of an organization. It's about people feeling safe to raise concerns, to ask questions, to fail. And I wonder if you reflect on your experiences in organizations, what most often stops people speaking up at work? Doesn't mean this is in the organization you're in right now, but I'm popping a little poll up on the screen, and you can actually tick more than one for this one. But what do you think stops people from speaking up at work the most? Okay. Interesting. They're really quite spread evenly, aren't they, amongst the four key areas there? Fear of judgment, nothing will change, conflict avoidance, and a lack of trust. Not so much with hierarchy and time. That's interesting. So if we think about what gets in the way, fear of judgment. So would I feel psychologically safe if I felt that when I spoke up, other people would judge or criticize me for what I'm saying? Of course not. So if we're in an environment where there is gossiping, where there isn't a sense of keeping information within a vault, keeping information safe, where there is potentially the risk of um, even kind of those horrible in inverted comments, banter comments, when you've revealed a bit of something, that's going to shut people down really quickly. That nothing will change. So again, sort of 21% of you feel that, well, people don't speak up because they feel that nothing ever changes. So that really demonstrates an issue of actually following through within an organization. We're going to talk about what builds trust and how that's created in a little bit, but that really highlights that they're not seeing the change. So essentially, what's the point? Too much hierarchy, so not so much. It was not the bottom one, but last but one. If there feels like there's so much hierarchy within an organization, you don't know where things stop, you don't know who to go to, it causes a bit of confusion. Conflict avoidance. Interestingly, Tom and I have literally just jumped off a training session talking about difficult conversations and conflict and why that comes up and what we're really avoiding. So many of us struggle with that. But what it says in an organization is really that people believe there's a potential for conflict. So I don't want to say anything because I don't want to cause conflict. I don't want to have that difficult conversation. Lack of trust. So just not feeling safe. So when we look at psychological safety, if we look at our physical safety, if I don't feel physically safe, then I'm not going to put my body in a situation where I feel it could be even riskier. Psychological safety is the same. If I don't feel psychologically safe, I'm not going to put my mind and my reputation in a position where it feels risky. And then not enough time. Sometimes this is a bit of an excuse in organizations of, oh, it's something we're aware of, but it's kind of a nice to have. And we're too busy now, so we'll have those difficult conversations down the line. So when we look at psychological safety, what we're really looking at is someone's ability to be able to be themselves at work, to ask the difficult questions, to kind of raise any challenges, issues. And psychological safety is a term that has actually been around for a very long time. It certainly feels like one of those terms that's a bit of a buzzword, but it's been around for quite a long time. And it gained a lot of popularity when Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard actually researched psych safety within organizations. And one of the groundbreaking studies within psych safety was a project called Project Aristotle. And Project Aristotle was I believe it's just over 2 years study within Google. And they looked at, I think it was around 150 different teams across Google. It was a lot of different teams, from very small teams to very large teams, from functional to operational to really technical teams. And what they were basically looking at was what makes a high performing team. And this study just went on and on and on, and they couldn't work out one defining factor that made a high performing team. It wasn't necessarily down to education, it wasn't down to how much they were paid, it wasn't down to the environment they were working in. And they were almost kind of at the end of this study thinking they haven't got the answer. And Edmondson's team started to look at one thread that they saw through the high performing teams. And what they saw was that every single high performing team within Google had a sense of psychological safety. They felt that they could be themselves, that it was okay to fail, it was okay to put ideas forward, that there wasn't any blame, there wasn't any judgment. It was okay to ask for help, say they were struggling. And it didn't really matter whether that was in accountancy or whether it was in engineering. It didn't matter what department. That was what was the foundation stone for a high performing team. If you want to look at Project Aristotle, there are 4 others as well. There are 4 other factors, but psychological safety is at the top of it. And as a result, it became much more well known. You know, people start to pay attention if what Google is doing and creating is working, other companies start to pay attention. And so Edmondson started to really recognize the value and the importance of psych safety. And she defines it as the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And this is something that you can't order into existence. You can't demand that people feel psychologically safe. This is something that actually is built moment by moment within an organization by how people show up, and particularly leaders, and particularly people-centric leaders. How we respond to each other, how we interact with each other, how we care for each other, the level of kindness we show. And that is what essentially creates the psychologically safe or unsafe culture. And when people feel safe, what Edmondson's research has found is that they're happier to take risks. They speak up much sooner, they collaborate more honestly, and they recover from setbacks much faster. And so psychological safety isn't a soft skill, it isn't a nice to have, it is a critical foundational element for high performance, resilience, innovation, creativity, and well-being. Without it, everything else will absolutely struggle. And Tom and I work with organizations all across the world, and we see that so often they'll bring us in to do difficult conversations or to handle stress better. And actually, what we identify within that organization is there isn't the foundation stone in psych safety. And without that, everything else is just a bit of a sticking plaster. So within a people context, it's really helpful to perhaps pay attention to what psych safety looks like when it's present and what it looks like when it's lacking. So let's start with the positive first. So when it's present, people will raise concerns earlier. Feedback is much easier to give and receive. It's not defensive. Mistakes become learning points. There are several organizations, really high profile organizations that celebrate failure. Coca-Cola famously had almost like failure meetings where they celebrated the failures, the things that hadn't worked, because it's kind of fail fast and move on. We've learned something from it, we can now move on. Managers also ask for help before crisis point. Now that's an important statement there. We're not just thinking of essentially the employees, the shop floor. We're thinking also of the people managing others. Did they feel psychologically safe to say, I'm struggling with this team. I need some help. I need some guidance. I need some support. HR is seen as supportive and not scary. So seen as a really essential part of that organization. And whilst HR is absolutely not solely responsible for psych safety, they're often seen as the department which really fosters it and really promotes it. Difficult conversations happen a lot sooner. So we're not putting things off, we're not stalling, we're not hoping things go away. And people can be honest without being punished for it, whether that is good or bad. When it's lacking, people tend to stay quiet. And that is really problematic because when your staff start staying quiet, you're lacking innovation, you're not getting the ideas that they're having, you're not getting the creativity, you're really stifling well-being, people aren't being honest, and potentially we're creating presenteeism. So we're not actually encouraging a workforce that's going to thrive and grow. Managers hide their uncertainty. So they're not confident to say what they're truly feeling and experiencing. Problems tend to arrive too late, so they reach that crisis point, and then it's much more reactive rather than proactive. HR can often be seen as the last resort. Like, oh, we don't want to bring that to HR. We don't want them to know. We don't, oh, now it's got so big, we have to involve HR. Feedback can feel personal. So think about it. If you don't feel safe with someone and they give you feedback, you're much more likely to feel defensive about it. Mistakes are covered up because a lack of psych safety tends to create a blame culture. So instead of people feeling okay with saying, yeah, I've messed up, people start covering it up or they blame other people. And people tend to perform fine while struggling underneath. So we never really get that honest response. We always get that kind of surface response. Now, if you're sat here and you're thinking, I think I kind of, my organization ticks a few of the lacking boxes, it's not the end of the world. In order to change anything, the very first thing we need is awareness. And if you've shown up to this session, my guess is that you're already aware of whether there is an element of psych safety within your organization or not. Some of you on this call will be absolutely excelling and exemplary in it. And some of you will be desperately trying to change things and feel like you're fighting a losing battle at times. So people, i.e. people in a people-centric role, are often the breaking point, the pressure point of a lack of psych safety. Because as I've already mentioned, if you're in a people-centric role, whether it's HR or whether you're just like the go-to person within an organization, you're expected to stay calm when other people aren't. So you're seen as the person who can handle the crisis, who can just keep a cool head when everyone else is losing theirs. You may also be the person that is holding a lot of confidentiality. So maybe you have one manager coming and complaining about a team member. Maybe you have decisions from senior management, from the board that you're holding in that you can't share with anyone. That carries a lot of emotional labor, a lot of pressure. You might be the one supporting others through conflict, challenge, change, and uncertainty, whilst you're experiencing it yourself. And you're probably the one who's available for everyone else and might not actually have an outlet yourself. I think what Tom talked about earlier, one-to-one support for people, I think it's just so important. One of the things we created at Beam are emotional labor sessions where those who are carrying so much for everyone else have a space that is safe, where they can offload, get peer support, get tools, be able to manage that. Because so many people in a people-centric role are where the buck stops, and they're carrying everything for everyone else without an outlet for themselves. You might be the one who is in something which really caused us to start people, which is what we call a well-being paradox. You champion well-being for everyone else whilst burning yourself out, whilst feeling stretched, whilst being unable to go on the course yourself, to have the coaching, to take the well-being perks. I cannot tell you, and it is one of the reasons why we started People, the amount of times that people would bring us in to deliver sessions that they know the organization need. And they're so passionate and caring and really invested in it. And then we'd say, are you on that? Oh, no, I haven't got time to sit on that workshop. No, I haven't got time. I can't. I'm too busy. So it's known as the well-being paradox. And if you're in that people-centric role, there's a chance that you're often trying to create psychological safety for someone when you don't actually have that safety yourself. And the problem with that is you can't create psychological safety if you're abandoning your own. If you don't have a space for you to feel psychologically safe, then creating it is always just going to drain your resources. So what I'd love to look at is really how that starts to impact an organization. If you're in a culture right now that doesn't feel safe, that's going to create a lot of extra strain as a people person. So grievances can arise rather than a conversation. So something that could have been perhaps dealt with much sooner and never have escalated has now become a major process and problem that is taking a lot of your time and energy. Burnout is more prevalent instead of people feeling safe to set boundaries. So kind of warning signs of a lack of psych safety is when people say to us that, oh no, I can't possibly finish at 5 p.m. That's just, it's not allowed really. There's just this unwritten expectation. And so we see staff burning themselves out through overcaring, overworking, over delivering. That can lead to a lot of resentment. So instead of us being open to giving feedback to our colleagues, we start to resent them. We don't feel safe enough to speak up. We don't feel that we can be honest with them. So we start to feel resentful, and that can really damage the relationships that we have. We then start to create a culture of much more silence instead of learning. No admitting to failures, no taking accountability, responsibility. People go quiet because they're scared of what happens if they speak up. And then instead of us being able to support people through that, it turns into more performance management instead of genuine support. And ultimately, we can end up just dealing with crisis after crisis instead of things that potentially could have been prevented a lot sooner. So if psych safety is in place, it actually saves us so much more emotional energy because people don't have to spend as much time managing their fears. They can speak up earlier, problems can be dealt with earlier. And so even though it might feel like a cultural shift, that cultural shift is so important because it will pay dividends in the long run. So I'm going to do another little poll, and this one is perhaps a little bit trickier. I want you to imagine, and even if you're not in a people-centric role, think that you're in a people-centric role, and a manager has come to you and privately said, I know morale is low, but I don't want to open a can of worms by asking the team how they really are. Just think about that for a moment. And then think about how would you respond? What response do you think would give most safety? And I'm going to launch a poll right now. So would it be, you need to ask them? Would it be what feels risky? Would it be that's poor leadership? Would it be maybe wait a bit? Would it be send a survey? What is your response to that? Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's almost half of A and B. Couple of survey. No one's going to tell them that it's poor leadership. That's good to hear. And no one's going to say, wait a bit. Okay, so you need to ask them, can be an appropriate response if it's already psychologically safe? But actually, if we're lacking psychological safety in the organization, you need to ask them, could feel confrontational and a bit almost dictatorial. So the most psychologically safe response would be what feels risky. And one of the best ways that we can create psychological safety is instead of giving confrontational responses or commands, is to apply curiosity. So what is it about it that feels risky? What are you scared they might say? What are you scared might happen? That starts to open up conversation and create more psychological safety. So it's a really nice little exercise to kind of look at what goes on in this organization. What's the kind of response I'd have in this organization if I said that I was scared about opening the can of worms? And so really what this brings me to is the core of psychological safety. And the core of psychological safety is one word, it's trust. And trust is something that we all know what it feels like when it's present, and we all know what it feels like when it's not present. But it's something that is usually built up by multiple actions. So it's not built by one big mission statement from the organization. It's definitely not built by one training course. It's not built by a values poster. It's built by what people repeatedly experience in their interactions. So as I say, we cannot order psychological safety. We have to create it in how we interact with our peers. So it's built when we truly listen. It's built when we don't react, we respond. It's built when we treat information safely and carefully if someone confides in us. It's built through fairness. It's built when you repair something when it's gone wrong. And so if we start to look at trust, and as I say, we all know what it feels like, but how do we define trust? How can we actually sum up what trust is? Well, we can do that actually, because there is some amazing research by Kouzes and Posner. I nearly got a spoonerism with their names there. Kouzes and Posner. And they are two incredible leadership coaches that have spent decades studying good leadership. They've literally studied thousands and thousands and thousands of leaders through industry, through military, through sport, to look at what makes a really good leader. And what they came out with was what makes a really good leader is that we trust them, which is great. Makes sense, right? If I've got a manager I trust, then I'm likely to follow them more. If I'm in the military and I trust the officer who's giving me a command, I'm likely to do it more. If I'm in sport and I trust my coach, I'm likely to do what they say. But Kouzes and Posner didn't think that was enough. They wanted to actually dive deeper. And what they looked at was, how do we create trust? And they came up with this wonderful term, which is an acronym, and they're American, so they had no idea. But for any fellow Welshies on the call, this looks like a really convincing Welsh word. Can even say it, dwysoed. It isn't a Welsh word, but it's an acronym that is quite convincing as a Welsh word. And what they came up with was that when people really trust someone, it's because of this one thing. Now, some of you might already have worked out what dwysoed means, but it means you do what you say you will do. That's it. If you want to create trust within any relationship in your life, with your partner, with your children, with your friend, with your colleagues, with the entire organization, you need to dwysoed. So if you say to a team member, I'll come back to you by Friday, and you don't come back to them, what you actually are doing is damaging trust. But if you come back to them, even if it's, I still don't have the answers, but I'm just letting you know I'm still on it, what you do is you cement and solidify trust, which therefore creates more psychological safety. If you tell your colleagues that you're going to raise something with senior managers, and then you don't, you damage trust. If you tell someone, oh, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out, and you never come back, you damage trust. So if we want to build trust within an organization, the organization needs to do what it says it will do as well. And we have encountered, not many, but we have unfortunately encountered organizations who have wonderful mission statements and put amazing things out on social media about how caring they are. But the culture that their employees are experiencing does not feel caring. That therefore damages trust. So one of the least exciting ways in which we can create psych safety is by being consistent and reliable. So I do what I say I will do, and I'm reliable to my word. That not only helps me as an individual leader, but it then ripples into the culture of the organization. So if there was one thing that you take away from today's session, I encourage it to be doisoid, that from now on, you do what you say you will do. And as a little side note, I always let people know that the most important relationship you ever have is the one you have with yourself. So if you are not reliable to your word to yourself, then actually you start to damage trust within yourself. You become less confident because I'm unreliable. So if I say to myself, I'm going to go to the gym tonight, and I don't go for no good reason, nobody else is really affected. But what happens is my brain starts to hear that I say I'll do something and I don't follow through with it. So I damage my self-reliability. So if you want to build your confidence and your trust in yourself, become reliable to your inner word and do what you say you will do. And then I want to wrap up our session with sharing a couple of tools. So the first tool is how you can use a very simple model to create a very safe response when people are sharing things with you. So you're really harnessing that trust and that safety. So the first thing is, if someone brings something challenging to you, is to just pause and make sure that you're regulated first. So don't allow yourself to respond in a highly emotive way. I'm just going to pause and take a breath. Let me just absorb that information first. Give me a moment to think about that, and I will come back to you. Then you might want to thank the person for bringing that. Acknowledge the bravery, acknowledge the courage. So someone has come to you and said they're struggling with another person at work. Okay, I'll take a breath, I'll pause. Thank you so much for bringing this to me. I know it's probably not easy. And then, and I love this, explore, ask a curious question. What that does is it enables you to get a fuller picture of what's going on, but it also enables the other person to feel much more heard and seen. So what is it that you think is the biggest challenge with this person? What is it that you think you need in order to improve that relationship? Ask a curious question and then clarify what's going to happen next. I always say one of the most powerful questions you can use if you're coaching anyone, it's just two words. It's now what? Now what do we do? How do we move forward with this? And you clarify that. Okay, so I'm going to go and do X, and I'll come back to you by next week with an update. And then the most important part is you doisoid it. You actually do what you say you will do. So that is a really lovely framework for building safety within any conversation. You pause, you acknowledge the difficulty, you thank them, you explore with curiosity, you clarify what happens next, and then you doisoid, you do what you say you will do. And to finish, I just want to share 5 safety building signals that you can just start to introduce into any of your conversations. So invite honesty. So what are we not saying yet? So encourage people to be more honest. And the way we can really do that is by being more honest ourselves. What are we not saying yet? Reward people for speaking up. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not easy. Respond, don't react. We don't want to be reactive, so take pauses before defending, correcting, or explaining. Normalize learning. So, okay, so what can this teach us? What do we learn from this? How can we not let this happen in the future? How can we improve from this? And then create clarity, create clear next steps. What happens from here is one of the bits that is always glaringly obvious as an outside observer that's sometimes missing is individuals will tackle those difficult conversations, but they don't have clarity at the end. So we've talked about the difficult thing, then we go away, but actually neither of us feels that anything's particularly changed because we haven't clarified what will change. So in summary, this isn't really an invitation for you to go and radically change the culture in your entire organization. This is an invitation to recognize that psychological safety is everyone's responsibility. And we can start really, really small with that. Mistakes are precious learning opportunities. Let's try and reframe them as such rather than seeing them as something negative, scary, and to be avoided. Trust is always built by doisoid, doing what you say you will do. And stay curious. Curiosity, I often tell people, is one of our superpowers. It really enables us to understand other people. I will hand back over to Tom, but if there are any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat box or hang around till the end and we will answer any questions. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Leanne. What an interesting session. And so this session will be sent out to everybody after it's been recorded. You'll be able to access that through our website. It's also in a huge YouTube playlist as well, so you'll be able to listen to all 30 events that we've done so far. There is a link in the chat to be able to book a call with us or reach out to us. Our details will also be at the end, but I will email a follow-up to everybody as well, so you won't miss out on a thing. We have some upcoming sessions, the next one being on the 11th of August, which is Flourishing After Failure. Really interesting topic. In September, we have Happiness for People, all around the science behind happiness. A really, really interesting session as well. And then we have our next guest specialist session from Darwin Gray on Employment Rights Act so that's towards the end of September as well. There's also a link for all of those in the chat, but I will send those in the follow-up email. And there's also a link to be able to join the LinkedIn group as well, the People Network. We share lots of updates through that as well. So we've also got some exciting news when it comes to People. We have got a home and we are building it right now. This is a place that we are bringing all of the things that we've done when it comes to People, all of the resources that we have at our disposal with Beam and all the guest specialist sessions, and it's all going to be in one place. And it's all going to be focused and centered around helping you understand the people that you work with. That's our mission. It's to make life easier by understanding the actions and behaviors of others at work. So we will be inviting the People Network that have come along to sessions to try and break it first, because every builder loves to know which bits need to be rebuilt. So you will be invited to that, and that is coming very soon. We haven't got a date yet, but you'll be invited to come along to there'll be a bit of a launch with the People community. So thank you very much. Leanne's just put up our details if you would like to reach out to us, but there will be an email coming with all of that as well.